Yes, it works. The recording works.
Jullie, jij?
Geweldig. The recording works. Yes, it works. Okay, guys, it is Tuesday, 21st of July already. This is lesson 15, I think. We'll count a little bit, but it's okay. We're going to recap the last lesson about quiescence. That means that the letter becomes quiet, and when it is quiet, it has no vowel. So simple as that. Let's see if I can find a very well-known example of this. Let's open a new sheet. And then this one. I'm setting it ready for you guys so you can see it. Now I go to my Zoomy. Where's my Zoomy? Come on. Share screen. A quiescent letter is a letter that you can find here. I think this is a good color. This is a quiescent letter, the Aleph is quiescent. That means it has no vowel. And you can see that the Tsere is beneath the Resh and the Girek, Girek is beneath the Shin, and the Aleph has no vowel. It's either lost or something happened, but as we might know, for the Hebrew language, it is considered to be God's language, and especially Torah, that every letter, every mark has its place in Torah. So even if a vowel disappears, they will not let the letter go. So the Aleph is still in this word, although it's quiet. It doesn't, it is not spoken. So let's go to the first recap. Oh, annotate out and put this one on. Come on, there we are. So we're gonna listen, and I can stop the list. If you have something to ask, please raise your hand or say something, unmute yourself. It's all fine with me. What we can do is, if you have a question or want something to clarify during the lesson, please raise your hand or say something, and then I can stop the video.
Quiescent letters. What is quiescence? Quiescence effectively means to become silent. In our context here, what we're talking about are consonants that cease to function as consonants. They become silent, and they tend to blend with the previous vowel. Now there are 4 consonants in Hebrew that can do this. He, Yud, Vav, and Aleph. Now, have we seen these consonants before as a group, or at least some of them? These ones here should look familiar to you. These are our matrix lectiones. If you remember, back to our vowel chart, we had these at the top. He was associated with the A vowels, I-E with, or Yud with the I-E vowels, and Vav with the O-U vowels. And these are the consonants that were used, sometimes as consonants, and sometimes to mark vowels. When they are used as vowels, they're called maters or matrix lectiones. Now, it's not surprising then that these are the ones that can quiesce. They can cease to function as a consonant and blend with the previous vowel. Now, what about Aleph? Aleph actually can also be a mater. We didn't talk about that before, and it's not that common, but in a word like shena, which means to sleep. The aleph here is functioning vocalically, together with our comets, as a vowel. So aleph too can function as a mater, which is consistent with what we have here with these ones. Now let's look at an English example of quiescence. These consonants will tend to quiesce at the end of a syllable, not at the beginning. And we see that also in English. If you look at the word table, and we look at the word depot, in table we have a T at the beginning of a word, and it's functioning as a consonant. We hear the sound T. In depot, it has become silent, and it's at the end of a word, and therefore the end of a syllable. Depot, we don't say depot. So we have similar behavior in English. Now let's take a look at a Hebrew example. First, let me write up this word, Yisrael, which we've used. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Let's get it right here. Yis starts with Hidik. Yis, Ra, Yisrael. Okay, so we have Yis, Ra, El. And what I want to look at here is aleph. Here we have aleph at the beginning of a syllable, and it is functioning as a consonant. It's holding the position of a consonant. This is a CVC syllable. Now let's look at another word, Yish. Yish, Ma, El, and this has an ayin in it, and then an aleph, and then a lamed. So Yish, Ma, El. Ishmael. Now, if we look at this last consonant here, it looks kind of funny, or this last syllable. We have a C, V, C, C. C, V, C, C. Well, what kind of syllable is that in Hebrew? We don't have that. And the reason it looks like CVC, but it's not, because this one here is the aleph, and the aleph is quiescent, so it's not functioning as a consonant there. Now, you can often tell a quiescent aleph because it won't have a vowel under it. Notice this one has a vowel under it, this one doesn't. So if you see an aleph without a vowel under it, particularly if it's in the middle, or it appears to be in the middle of a syllable, or sometimes at the end, then you probably have a quiescent aleph. Let's take a look at another example. This is Reshit. Oops. Re. Reshit. Reshit means beginning. The first word in the Bible is Bereshit, which puts B in front of this, in the beginning. Reshit, the syllable is here, syllable division, and here we have a quiescent aleph at the end, and it has no vowel under it. So aleph will quiesce, and you can tell because it doesn't have the vowel. Now, at the beginning of a consonant, at the beginning of a syllable, it's a consonant. At the end of a syllable is where it quiesces. What will often happen is there'll be a change in a word that will cause an aleph to move from the beginning to the end, and then quiesce. And this happens frequently when you add an inseparable preposition. If you have a word, let's imagine this is our word, and we have aleph at the beginning. If we add a l, b, or k, what will sometimes happen is this l will steal this first letter as part of its syllable, and so now this letter finds itself at the end of a syllable. Without the l, it was at the beginning. And so when you put l or b or k on a word beginning with aleph, the aleph may well quiesce because now it finds itself at the end of a syllable. Let's look at an example. Now I need a lot of space here, so I'm going to write at the top.
Okay, just a short pause. What he's saying, that there are letters. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Yes? Can you hear me, Donald? Yeah, okay. What you, oh, this one. Just a short recap. The letters that can become silent or quiet are the letters that are meters. And I have the table here again. And as you can see, the matrix lectionis over here, the He, the Yud, the Vav, and he has added the Aleph, because the Aleph sometimes functions as a mater lectionis also. And its mater lectionis are sometimes also called historically long vowels. So these letters carry long vowels. The long A, the long E, the long I, the long O, and the long U. And what happens is that at the end of a syllable, the letters will become quiet. So when you have a He, a Yud, a Vav, or and now it's talking about Aleph, the Aleph here, as an example, when the Aleph is at the beginning of a word and there becomes something in front of it, a prefix like le, be, or que, then the Aleph moves to the end of the syllable, and there it loses its vowel and becomes quiet. So that is what he's talking in a recap. I hope this helps. And now I go back to him again. If you have any questions, please ask, and we continue.
Elohim is the word I want here. God. Elo. And actually I'm going to copy this. So we need it 4 times. Let's see if we can fit it on this page. 2, 3, 4. It's a little squished, but okay. What happens if we add an inseparable preposition like le on here? Well, the first thing we have to do is we notice here we have 2 shavas at the beginning of a word. And when we have that, we need to apply our rule of shava. So by way of review, we had 2 rules of shava. One was where we have 2 simple shavas at the beginning of a word. And when we have that, the first shava becomes a hiddick, and the second one goes silent. If we have a compound shava, like a chataf sagol and a regular shava, then what happens, you remember? This one, the first shava, becomes the short vowel that corresponds to the compound shava. So in this case, sagol. So this one changes to sagol, and the second one stays. So let's apply our rule of shava. Put our le there again, and this becomes sagol. So le Elohim becomes le Elohim. So our step here is rule of shava. Now, what happens is this finds itself now at the end of a syllable, and in this case it quiesces. So let's repeat our le here, and let's erase. If it quiesces, it loses its vowel. So we'll erase it. So this step is quiescence. Quiescence of the aleph. Now, what often happens with aleph, as opposed to the other quiescent letters, is that when aleph quiesces, you will frequently get, or often get, compensatory lengthening. So, what that means is, let me erase this here. It's already quiesced, so we've lost that. We've lost a vowel, so it makes things shorter, so this is going to lengthen now to compensate. Try and keep the same overall length. And if you're going to lengthen a sagol, what are you going to get? It's going to lengthen its family. Remember our vowel chart? We had sagol, and above it we had tsere. So, this is going to become a tsere. So this here is compensatory lengthening. Now these are all the steps that happen that explain what a person would do naturally if they were speaking. Le Elohim is harder to say than l'Elohim. But what we have here is a rule of Shava, we have quiescence, then we have compensatory lengthening. Okay, now it doesn't always happen. Aleph will not always quiesce. Let me look at a very similar example, but a case where it does not quiesce. And this is the word, all these little dashes, Edom. You have the very same beginning. Edom means Edom. Okay, make sure I spelled that right. Edom. If we add le on there, we're going to do the same step we did before. Let me rewrite this here. Edom. So we need to apply the rule of Shava because we have two Shavas at the beginning of a word. So as before, this will become Segol, but then it stops. Le Edom. That's how you say it. This does not quiesce. So Aleph does not always quiesce. And the purpose of this module is not to try and explain the rules for when it quiesces, but rather to explain what's happening so that you can recognize it when you see it. Now let's take a look at one of the other letters. Similar.
Let's go back to our word. Now we can perhaps see. This is Bereshit again. See here. Bereshit. And we say here, Etzere. Oh, annotate. There is Etzere. That is a long E vowel. This is the compound Shava, or the Shava. A very short from Bereshit. It's not Bereshit, it's Bereshit. And that has to do with to compensate for the loss of a vowel that was formerly there. It goes longer to a long vowel. That's how you can see it over here. So again, let's move this out. This is an example of where you can see that. So the long vowel before a quiescent letter. And then let's go back to my, oh, I need to stop annotate. I always forget that.
Behavior with the Yud. And we'll look at the word Yehuda. Yehuda. Judah. And let me copy this one as well. I think we only need this 3 times. 2, 3. And let us add our inseparable preposition as before. So we're adding an inseparable preposition. So we have to apply the rule of Shava. In this case, we applied the first rule because we have 2 simple Shavas. So the first one becomes a Hidik and the second one becomes silent. Le Yehuda becomes Li Yehuda, or something like that. I don't know how you would pronounce that. Li Yehuda, perhaps. But the Yud now quiesces. So this is rule of Shava. And as with the Aleph now, the Yud finds itself at the end of a syllable. Here it was at the beginning before we added this. Now it's at the end. Yud can quiesce. In fact, it does. It loses its consonantal value and starts to function, and functions as a vowel. So let's put this down. Let's erase our, let's erase E. We'll erase our Shava under the Yud, and now we have Lihuda. So this is quiescence. And we don't have any compensatory lengthening as we did with the Aleph. So now we have Hidik Yud. Before we just had Hidik. And the Yud now is part of the vowel, Hidik Yud, as opposed to functioning as a consonant, which it was with the word by itself, Yehuda. So there's an example of quiescence with the letter Yud. Now Aleph will quiesce more frequently than Yud and Vav. There are more examples of Yud and Vav at the end of a word where it's not quiescing. For example, the word dai, which means enough, or goi. How do you spell goi? Goi, nation. There you have a yud at the end, and it's functioning as a consonant. Or tsav. There you have a vav at the end, functioning as a consonant. Tsav means command. It's the word to command in the imperative form. So you're telling someone, command these other people to do whatever. Command. So, by way of review, we have 4 consonants, He, Yud, Vav, and Aleph, that can function as, or can lose their consonantal value. They can quiesce, they can cease to function as consonants, they'll blend with the previous vowel, and this tends to happen at the end of syllables. And with Aleph, you will also sometimes get quiescent or compensatory lengthening. It will lose its vowel underneath it, and the vowel before it will lengthen.
Okay. This was the rule of quiescence letters, and it means that a letter that carries a vowel and is a mater lectionis, Aleph, He, Yud, or Vav, can lose its vowel and become quiet and still be in the word. In the last example with Li Yehuda, the Yud even becomes mater lectionis. It becomes a Chedic Yud. This lesson was not meant to explain when it happens and how it happens and how, if you translate from Dutch into Hebrew, when you should do that. It only helps you to understand when you read Hebrew and you see one of these letters without a vowel, you understand, okay, in this case, this vowel has quiescence. It has become quiet. It loses its vowel, but not its meaning inside the word. And we all know that letters carry numbers, so the number of the word stays the same, and that is important to understand scripture and the deeper meanings of scripture. So that is maybe one of the reasons why they don't disappear from a word when they lose their vowel. And what he also did was that he showed you the steps that are taken to get from rule of Sheva, quiescence, compensatory lengthening into the end word. And all these steps are made inside the head, and they are already in the text. So we can see that in a word like Bereshit, and there are maybe other words, Li Yehuda. I tried to find one, but I couldn't find it so quickly. So what happens is that the quiescence letter, recognize it if you find one of these 4 letters without a vowel, it has gone quiet and is still there, but it's not pronounced. Now we go to the next module of this session, and that is the second part of gutturals and resh. And he's going to talk about what kind of vowels the gutturals would like to have. If you could try with me, if you speak the A sound, the A sound is in the back of your throat. You feel it vibrates here. But when you have an E, it's in the front of the mouth. So the E vowel is in the front and the A vowel is in the back. So that is one thing to remember when he talks about the gutturals and resh. In Dutch, they call laryngale, or the sounds that come from the back of the throat. And again, Aleph has a special position because, well, he will show you. Let's not do the lesson he does. He can do it much better than I. So gutturals and resh is over here. And there we go. Nope. Gutturals and resh, part 2. Yo-ho.
Gutturals and resh, part 2. We had a module earlier called Gutturals and resh, and there we introduced the gutturals and mentioned that They can affect vowels around them, change vowels around them. And we also said that resh is part of the gutturals because it has some behaviors that are similar to the gutturals. But that's about all we said. So now I'd like to tell you what those behaviors are. So, by way of review, first of all, what are the gutturals again? We have aleph, ayin, chet, and hey. Those are our gutturals. And then we often include resh together with them. Now, the first point, we'll have 3 points here. The first one is to talk about which vowels or what vowels they like, what vowels they tend to be associated with. The ayin, the chet, and the hey, together with the resh, so basically all of them except for the aleph, they tend to like a vowels. So we have our kametz, patach, chataf patach. Now remember, this one is related to the short O, not the A, so forget about that one. So these ones like the A vowels. Aleph, on the other hand, will often have an E vowel. So the sagol or the chataf sagol, the compound shava associated with sagol. Now why is this? These are the gutturals that are pronounceable. Chet and hey we know how to pronounce, resh we know how to pronounce. Ayin is actually pronounceable. It's a consonant way back in the throat. And so consonants that are pronounced in the back of the throat will tend to have vowels pronounced at the back of the mouth associated with them because it's easier to transition from an A vowel to these gutturals and resh than it is to transition from a vowel that's pronounced at the beginning of the mouth, like an E, for instance. So these are the pronounceable gutturals, and so they have a tendency to change vowels to A vowels. Aleph, on the other hand, really isn't a pronounceable, or if you do pronounce it, you pronounce it as a glottal stop, a stoppage of breath, and so it doesn't have the same tendency to pull vowels to the back of the mouth like these ones do. And in fact, it tends to take an E vowel. So this is because it's not really pronounceable, unlike these ones. So that's the first point. They tend to take A vowels except for aleph, which takes an E vowel. The second point is that none of them double. So no doubling. No doubling. And that applies to all of them. All the gutturals and resh. None of them can double. The third point is a reminder. We already talked about this earlier, and that is that the gutturals take composite shava. So aleph, ayin, chet, and hey will take a composite shava or compound shava rather than a simple shava. So if you have a word, you have one of these there, and you expect to see a simple shava, just put a compound shava in instead. Now which one? Well, that depends, but it won't be a simple shava. Resh, on the other hand, this is where resh is a little different than the gutturals. It can take a simple shava. Simple shava. So, the characteristics of gutturals and resh are that they tend to take A vowels, except for aleph, which likes E vowels, eh. There's no doubling, none of them can double, and this will have consequences when you have a word that normally doubles in a certain place. If there's a guttural or resh there, then it won't double and you'll get other things that happen instead of it, or potentially. And thirdly, they will take a composite shava, the gutturals that is, while resh can take a simple shava.
Okay. Any questions about this? It was just an explanation that the gutturals cannot double. That means you don't transliterate an aleph, an ayin, an hey, or a chet into two separate letters, as you do with hashamayim, then you have two shins, because the dot is in the shin. They don't double, they can't. And the other part was very simple, what kind of letters, vowels they like, and they tend to use the compound shava instead of the simple shava. And you see this, for instance, in the word Elohim. Elohim begins with the compound shava connected to the segol, the compound segol. I forgot the name, sorry. I forgot it. Oh, I can see it here. Wait. Nope, that's not the one. Chataf segol. There it is. The Chataf segol. Let's go to the side. So the Aleph tends to use this one, Elohim. So the Aleph likes the Chataf segol, and the others like, so the Hey and the Yud and the Vav like to have this one, Vayomeh or whatever. So, okay, are you ready for the next lesson? You know, this is a very important point in our lessons. We are now at lesson 6 or chapter 6 of the big book. And that means that next week we are going to start with nouns and verbs. So today's lesson is a kind of closure, because everything you can learn about how the letters behave and how all these signs behave comes now to a conclusion. So these 6 first chapters of the book are a basic foundation for your Hebrew, and it helps you understand to read the Hebrew text much better than you would have done 15 weeks ago. So I hope you also find that. So the first 6 lessons talks about the lessons, the letters, the vowels, the shavas, the accents, and everything we learned was about the article, inseparable prepositions, and this is the last lesson. It becomes a little bit more technical, the last 2 modules, but be sure this is the last time that we go into technical details of what is happening with letters and how they are pronounced, etc. Because next week we go to chapter 7 and we start with a noun, and that's going to be fun, because now we are learning how nouns behave and how verbs are going to behave, etc., etc. So we start coming now into the area of really understanding to read Hebrew, and when you see a passage in the text, you can understand the text better, and then you say, why did they translate it like this? Because there is also another meaning possible. Okay, let's go to number 3, I think. Yes, I hope you like coal mine. We're going to talk about coal mine letters.
Ronald,
Yes?
mag ik vragen? Can I have a question?
Who is talking?
Marianne.
Yeah?
Yeah? You put on the hey, the vav and the yod by the petach. Atach petach. You put it in the last.
Yeah, just as an example to show you that Aleph likes the E sound and the others like the A sound.
But in the film, he said about the shape, the hey, and the ayin.
Yeah.
Caterals.
Also, yeah. Ayin, yeah, that's correct.
All right, but you put the other letters in.
Yeah, just
right.
put the, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't by the lesson, that's why.
Yeah.
It was the same.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. That's fine.
Where? Coal mine. We're going to go to coal mine letters. Nope, you can go down.
The coal mine letters. We just talked about gutturals and resh, and one of the properties of gutturals and resh that we noted was that they don't double. They cannot take a dagesh forte. Well, the coal mine letters are some other letters that, under certain circumstances, also cannot double or do not double. So let me give you the letters here. Coal mine is the mnemonic. So let's write it down. Coal mine. Oops. Coal mine. Okay. Now what we're concerned with here are the consonants. So the kof, the vav, lamed, mem, yud, and nun. What the rule says is this. If you have one of these letters, let's take the yud as an example, and it has a vocal shava after it. So it's followed by a vocal shava, or vocal shava is sitting under it. If for some other reason you expect this yud to be doubled, sometimes you will find it doubled. In other words, you'll have the dagesh forte there, and sometimes you won't. This rule doesn't predict when you'll find it with or without. It simply says that these ones have a tendency to drop their dagesh forte if they're followed by a vocal shava. Now this rule is covered in Joam Maroca, or is discussed there, a Grammar of Biblical Hebrew on page 83. And they give a bit of a reason. They say that no doubt this happens, because in some cases there was a disinclination to make a long consonant depend on such a weak vowel. In other words, if you double one of these here, why these consonants in particular, I don't know, but if you double one of these, you get a long consonantal part, and here you have a very short vowel, the shortest of all vowels. And what they're saying is sometimes this vowel simply isn't enough to carry this, and so it'll sometimes drop. Be that as it may, what we're concerned with here is just remember this rule. It'll come in handy. If you remember the word or the mnemonic coal mine, you'll know that these letters can drop their dagesh forte when followed by a vocal shava.
Okay, so coal mine letters are letters that can do not double when there is a vocal shava following. Again, sometimes you see this in Hebrew. You see yud, two yuds next to each other and with a shava, and then one doubles and one not. So this rule helps you understand sometimes, okay, I see this and I understand it. It's something just for your knowledge. I go now not to the section article before week lessons, but I go to the inseparable prepositions part 2. Because this is a shorter video and I want to make sure to have this one ready. Oh, come up. Make it bigger. Inseparable prepositions. Yes. You know, the inseparable prepositions are le, be, and que, and these are in a Dutch voorzetsel, and they are always connected to the noun. So an inseparable preposition in Hebrew means that it is le, be, and que when you never see them standing alone. You can only see them, le, be, and que, directly connected as a prefix to the noun. Sometimes there is this rule where there is an article in between. We talked about it the last lesson, I think, where it changed from le, ha, changes to la, the hey goes and the lamed takes the place of the hey, and everything stays the same. So now we're going to talk about part 2 of inseparable prepositions.
Inseparable prepositions on definite nouns, part 2. We had a module entitled this in the past, and there we looked at what happens when you put le, be, or que, one of the inseparable prepositions, on a word that has a definite article ha. So let us review that. We'll look at the word sefer. This is an easy module compared to the last one. It's always nice. Sefer, book. So So if we add ha to it, we have three parts, remember? We have the consonant, we have the vowel, patach, and we have gemination of the following letter, which is marked by the dagesh forward. Now what happens when we add l to it? Let us change color here. If you add l, b, or k, we'll take l as our example. The rule was simple. All you do is you replace the hey with the lamed. All the vowels are retained from the article, whatever was going on here before. So, let's rewrite this here. So, ha-sefer becomes la-sefer, and I'll just replace this here, my color again, to emphasize that the only thing we've changed is the consonant. Ha-sefer becomes la-sefer. The question now is, what happens when this first consonant, instead of a samech here, you have one of the weak letters? The gutturals, aleph, ayin, hey, chet, or reish, or the two coal mine letters that can give problems, the yud or the m. Well, what happens is the very same thing. You do the same procedure. You simply replace the hey with the appropriate consonant from l, b, or k, and all the other features remain. So if you have implied doubling, then you'll still have implied doubling with the l, or compensatory lengthening, or just simple dropping of the dagesh omitted, or harmonization. So let's look at a couple of examples. Look at the word ir, which means city. This was one of our examples previously, I think. Ir. So if we add the article, now this is a test from, or a review of the last module, what's going to happen? If we have ayin here with a yud with a hidik under it, what's going to happen is we're going to get what? Compensatory lengthening. This is a weak guttural. Remember we had aleph, ayin, and reish. Those give compensatory lengthening, at least with this vowel, unless this was a comet. So this will lengthen, and of course we have no dagesh there. Let me get rid of this here. So what happens now when we put, let's say, l on there? We just replace this with this, so we get, and I'll change my color back to emphasize that nothing else is changing. Ha, or la, ir. Ha-ir becomes la-ir. The compensatory lengthening remains, even with the inseparable preposition. Let's take a look at another one. Let's look at cherev. Cherev, that's supposed to be a bait there. Cherev means sword, and if we add the article to it, what's going to happen? This is a strong guttural, and it doesn't have the patach. At the patach we have an exception, but a strong guttural, so we're going to have virtual doubling, or implied doubling, which basically means the vowel stays the same, but no dagesh. And we're pretending that this is doubling even though we can't see it. Okay, so we got implied doubling there. We add, let's add k this time. Now remember, k and b have a dagesh lene in them. L doesn't. K and b do because they are begad kafat letters. So this here is a dagesh lene. But again, the same procedure. You just replace the hey with the k. So let's do that. So we have k. And it's just, oh, let's replace that guy. Make a proper kaf. So k with the dagesh lene. This doesn't go. All we do is replace the consonant. And again, let's change our colors back to emphasize that nothing else is changing. This stays the same, and we have our implied doubling. Right? No dagesh there because implied doubling. Ha-cherev becomes ka-cherev. So in short, the rules are the same. Don't change anything except for the consonants when you add b, l, or k to a noun that has a definite article.
Wow. Oh.
Geen geluid. Je hebt geen geluid.
And now?
Ja, nu wel.
Ah. What happens here is that normally the definite article has a dagesh forte following. That means that the next letter, the first letter of the word, doubles. But as we have learned, the gutturals and reish and the coal mine letters do not double so easily. The gutturals and reish do not double at all, and the coal mine letters don't double or lose their dagesh forte. So what he explained now, what happens if you put an inseparable preposition to a word that has the definite article. And I want to show you this in scripture. Let's see here. Haor. You see Haor here. You see and it's translated as delight. So what happens here, there is an aleph and there is a hey, and normally the definite article is the hey, the patach, and a dagesh forte. So what we see here is not a hey and a patach, we see an hey and a kametz, and no dagesh forte. So what happens is what they call compensatory lengthening. That means that the short vowel patach, oh, different color, that's better. The short vowel patach that is normally in the definite article changes to a kametz. So from short to long. It compensates because it cannot double the aleph. Now this is interesting. Do you understand what I'm saying, guys? You see here la ha or, which means delight, but or starts with an aleph. And an aleph cannot be doubled. So what happens is that the vowel changes from short to long to compensate for the fact that the aleph cannot double. Okay. Wipe this out. And now we go to the next verse, because now it becomes interesting. Here, go to that side, please. Oh, annotate off. Yep, there we go. Go to annotate. Use the eraser. So. Can you see what's happening? We have laor. You see that? It's not haor, as we saw before. This was in the previous verse, but now we see haor. So that means that haor has an inseparable preposition connected. So it should say le haor. And you know, from the last module, he said you replace the hey with a lamed. And the compensatory lengthening is still there. So it becomes a lamed with a kametz and an aleph, a reish, a golem vav and a reish. And that's what you see over here. But the strange thing is they still and that is what I couldn't get my head around, they still translated it as delight. But there is a word missing. The, how do you say that? The inseparable preposition le is missing here. Because it does not say the light, because that would be haor. It says laor, so it is and to the light or toward the light, something like that. So Vayikra Elohim laor yom. So there is a deeper meaning that he calls laor yom and not haor yom. It implies, oh my gosh, this is can't be read. Let's get rid of this so you can see what I'm doing. What you can see here is that Vayikra and called God the light Yom. So we see here that the Laor is called Yom and not Haor. It's translated as Haor, but it doesn't say that in Hebrew. It says it is a movement of the light that is called day. And that gives you a deeper meaning. This is one of the examples that helped me last week when I did this conference, Ruling Light. This is one of the things I discovered when I studied about light. I saw the difference between Haor and Laor. If I didn't have followed these modules, I wouldn't have understood that Laor is a contraction of an inseparable preposition, a definite article, and a noun. But now of this lesson, and this is one of the examples, now of this lesson, I understood that what we've got here is an inseparable preposition, a definite article, and a noun. And what is missing in the translation is this part. They just left it out. And what I talked about is that God called the day something that has to do with movement of light. It has to do with something the light does, or it has to do with something I do to the light. And then I remembered what in John, the chapter 9 or 11 something, he says, aren't there 12 hours in a day? And you will not stumble when you walk in the day. That means if you walk in the light, but because Jesus says, you shall not stumble because the light is in you. And that is the connection I could make based on simple doing the lessons of inseparable prepositions, definite article, and a guttural that does not double. I now understand what it's saying here. I understand laor, or at least one part of it. I understand the compensatory lengthening. I understand that the hay has vanished and that the lamed replaced the hay. So it means that it is not the light, but it is to the light or toward the light. So this is one of the examples that helped me, and I so much enjoy studying Hebrew because you get deeper meanings just at looking at the text and say, hey, this is something I recognize. What's happening here? I hope you understand this. Any other questions?
Ik heb er nog wel een aanvulling op, Ronald.
Ja.
Alle werkwoorden beginnen met le. Is je dat wel eens opgevallen?
Met we.
Met le.
Well, we just saw.
Alle werkwoorden, dus wat je moet gaan doen, zeg maar.
Hier.
De beweging.
Dit, ja, maar dit is een werkwoord, een verb. Vayikra is een verb.
Ja, we is en.
Ja, en het staat yikra.
But, called is al een vervoeging, hè?
Ja.
Maar het werkwoord roepen begint met le en dan roepen. Zeg maar.
Ja.
Nog niet de vervoeging hebt gehad.
Ja. Kara is the verb. But we get to the verbs. We will get there. But la or is a noun and not a verb.
Mhm. En met dat, ja, in het Nederlands zeg maar, hè? Maken begint bijvoorbeeld met le maken. De hele werkwoord maken. En niet ik maak, jij maakt. Maar maken zelf begint met le maken, zeg maar. Eventjes.
Ja, maar dat is voor later. Dat is als we de werkwoorden gaan doen.
Mhm.
We gaan eerst de zelfstandig naamwoorden nog doen in de volgende les. Dankjewel. It's almost time. There is one module I didn't do because it is kind of very technical, and I don't think you can. I want to ask you to look at it for yourself because he talks about it a little bit, but it's quite a technical module and difficult to understand, and it has to do what happens when you put an article before a weak letter. And a weak letter is a letter that cannot double or is a coal mine letter. And so I want to ask you to do all the lessons are available in your Dropbox folder. And the lesson I want you to review yourself is called Article Before Weak Letters. It's 15 minutes long. And because next week I really want to start with chapter 7 about the noun. Okay? Are there any questions? It's almost time. No questions? Hooray! Okay, guys, see you next week. And enjoy. If you want to learn more about Revelations, you can go to the Activate site, free lesson of Dr. O about mysteries in Revelation. Hope to see you there, or else have a good evening and enjoy your family. God bless.
Hoi, Ronald.
Bye-bye.